ever feel like you're talking, but no one's really hearing you? Or maybe you're the one listening, but somehow the message never quite lands. You nod, you respond, you engage, but something's missing. It's like the conversation is happening in two different worlds. Words collide, but connection doesn't. And in a time where everyone is talking, shouting, posting, and proving, almost no one is truly listening. Yet, listening, real, intentional, active listening, is the quiet superpower that shapes extraordinary relationships, unforgettable leaders, and magnetic communicators. It's not just a social skill, it's an emotional art. It's the difference between being heard and being understood. This audiobook isn't about communication in the usual sense. It's about connection. It's about what happens in the spaces between words. Because when you master the art of active listening, you stop reacting to people and start understanding them. You stop chasing validation and start creating trust. And that's what this journey is about. In the next chapters, we'll peel back the layers of real connection, how to listen beneath the surface, hear what's not being said, and build the kind of presence that changes every interaction you have. Let's begin where it all starts, inside the noise. Chapter 1. The Echo Chamber Effect. There's a strange thing happening in our world today. We've never had more ways to talk, yet we've never been so unheard. Scroll through your feed. Watch a conversation unfold online. Everyone's speaking louder, faster, sharper, but almost no one is listening. We've built an ecosystem of noise, where attention is currency and silence feels like losing. Where we don't pause to understand, we pause to reload. And in that rush, connection dies. You can feel it. In relationships, workplaces, even friendships. People don't talk to each other anymore. They talk at each other. Each conversation becomes a competition of egos, a game of who's right, who's smarter, who wins the argument. But here's the truth. No one wins when no one's heard. Active listening isn't just about keeping quiet while someone else speaks. It's the discipline of presence, the ability to quiet your inner world long enough to enter someone else's. And that's harder than it sounds, because most of us don't listen with the intent to understand. We listen with the intent to reply. We're preparing our next sentence. We're waiting for our turn. We're filtering everything they say through what we already believe. That's not listening. That's defending. And in that subtle shift, from listening to waiting, we lose the thread of human connection. Think of your mind as an echo chamber. Every opinion, every emotion, every assumption bounces around inside. And when someone speaks, you don't hear their words. You hear your reflection of them. You're not hearing reality. You're hearing your interpretation of it. The noise inside you becomes louder than the voice in front of you. This is why we miss the small things, the hesitation in someone's tone, the quiet, "I'm fine," that isn't fine, the energy shift in a conversation that tells us something's wrong. We're distracted not by the world, but by our own thoughts, by our desire to be right, by our fear of silence. And that's the great irony. Silence is where truth lives. Imagine this. You're sitting across from someone who truly listens. They're not interrupting. They're not trying to fix you. They're not waiting for their turn. They're with you. Completely. Every word you say lands. Every pause you take feels safe. You start saying things you didn't even know you wanted to say. That's not all magic. That's presence. That's active listening in its purest form. And the crazy part? You don't even remember what they said. You remember how they made you feel. That's the essence of connection, the invisible space that deep listening creates. But here's the cost of not listening. Every time you interrupt, assume, or half-listen, you teach people that their voice doesn't matter. You teach them that conversations are performance, not exchange. And slowly, people stop showing you their real selves. They start filtering their truth. They start shrinking their words. They start talking to the idea of you, not to you. And that's how distance grows, not from absence, but from unacknowledged presence. The echo chamber isn't just a metaphor. It's a psychological trap. Every human mind has two tracks, the one that listens outwardly and the one that runs commentary inwardly. You might be nodding to someone while your mind is saying, "I've heard this before. I know what they mean." Or worse, "When do I get to speak?" The more self-centered that inner track becomes, the less empathy we have left to give. Empathy doesn't live in the head. It lives in attention. And without attention, connection starves. The first step to mastering active listening isn't learning how to listen, it's learning why you don't. Ask yourself, what's louder in my life, the voice of others or the voice of my own thoughts? Because until you can quiet the noise inside, you'll never hear the truth outside. When you start to listen differently, everything changes. The tension in your relationships eases. Misunderstandings disappear before they start. People begin to trust you, not because you speak perfectly, but because you see them. That's the real currency of connection, not eloquence, not charisma, presence. Active listening is the foundation of every form of leadership, from boardrooms to bedrooms, because the one who listens the deepest leads the strongest. When you understand others, you gain insight into what they need, what they fear, and what they dream of. That's where influence begins, not in persuasion, but in perception. When you listen with empathy, you don't control people, you connect with them. And connection is the most persuasive force in the world. So here's the truth most people overlook. Listening isn't passive. It's one of the most active things you can do. It requires patience, discipline, humility. But when you master it, conversations stop being battles. They become bridges. And when you start building bridges instead of walls, your world changes. People open up. Trust returns. Respect becomes natural. Because deep down, everyone just wants to be understood. And when you give that to them, when you truly, deeply listen, they'll never forget how you made them feel. That's where we begin. In the next chapter, we'll unlock how to do it, the tools, the body language, and the secret techniques that turn ordinary talk into extraordinary connection. Because listening isn't just a skill, it's a superpower, and you're about to master it. Chapter 2. The Echo Chamber Effect. Why we struggle to truly hear. We live in a world that never shuts up. Notifications hum. Timelines scroll endlessly. Conversations overlap. 1,000 voices competing for your attention. But amid all that noise, something vital has been lost. We've forgotten how to truly listen. We don't listen to understand. We listen to reply. We listen to defend. We listen to prove a point. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, we've built what psychologists call the echo chamber effect. It's the invisible wall between what's being said and what's being heard. The echo chamber starts quietly. You begin a conversation with someone, maybe a colleague, a partner, or a friend. They're speaking, their words spilling with meaning. But your mind isn't with them. You're half inside the talk, and half inside your own head. You're rehearsing what to say next. You're analyzing. You're judging. You're preparing your response before they've even finished their thought. And just like that, the moment slips away. You heard the words, but you didn't hear them. That's the tragedy of modern connection. We're drowning in communication, yet starving for understanding. We can text across oceans, FaceTime across continents, comment, post, react. But when it comes to listening, to truly receiving another human being's truth, we fall short. Not because we don't care, but because our minds are conditioned to chase stimulation, to multitask, to respond faster and louder. The world rewards the talkers. The world celebrates the ones who speak. But the real power, the kind that transforms relationships, careers, and even entire lives, belongs to the listeners. Every time you half listen to someone, you send an unconscious signal. You're saying, your voice doesn't matter as much as my thoughts. And the other person feels it. They shrink. They close off. They stop sharing. Because why would they open up when they sense they're speaking into a void? That's how trust erodes. One shallow conversation at a time. The echo chamber doesn't just live between people, it lives within us. When was the last time you truly listened to your own thoughts? Without judgment, without interruption, without noise. Most people can't stand silence. They fill it with music, podcasts, notifications, endless chatter, because silence reveals too much. But silence is where true listening begins. To hear others, you must first learn to hear yourself, your breath, your thoughts, your heartbeat between sentences. When you tune into your inner frequency, the outside world begins to sound clearer too. The cost of not listening is subtle, but devastating. Marriages dissolve not because of too little love, but too little listening. Friendships fade because people stop being curious about each other. Leaders lose teams not from lack of vision, but from the failure to hear what their people are really saying. Listening is the bridge that keeps all human bonds alive. And every day you neglect it, that bridge weakens until one day it collapses. There's a story about a famous therapist who once said, "People don't come to me for answers, they come to be heard." Because being heard is healing. It's validating. It's the language of love, empathy, and respect. When someone feels truly heard, their shoulders drop, their tone softens, and something in them relaxes. It's as if you're saying, "I see you, I understand you, you matter." And here's the truth few realize. Listening changes the listener too. When you start paying deep attention to others, your own thinking sharpens, your empathy expands, your perception widens, you start catching the details that most people miss. The flicker in someone's eyes, the tension behind a polite smile, the sigh hidden inside a laugh. You start hearing life at a deeper frequency. So ask yourself, honestly, when was the last time you listened to someone without checking your phone, without thinking of your next line, without drifting into your own thoughts? Because that's where mastery begins. In the smallest, simplest moments, the 10-second pauses that show someone you're truly there. Active listening isn't about nodding or saying, "uh-huh." It's about presence. It's about curiosity. It's about letting silence speak louder than your ego. If you want to stand out in a world of noise, listen. If you want to lead with influence, then listen. If you want to love deeply and be loved back, listen. Because the quality of your listening determines the quality of your relationships. And the quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life. In the next chapter, we'll step inside the mind of a master listener. You'll discover the exact tools, the body language, the subtle cues, and the mental shifts that separate a passive hearer from a truly active listener. It's time to leave the echo chamber behind and step into the world where connection feels alive again. Chapter 3. Unveiling the Active Listener's Toolkit. Listening is an art, but like every art form, it can be mastered with the right tools. The people who seem magnetic in conversation, the ones who make you feel like you're the only person in the room, aren't born that way. They've trained their attention, they've disciplined their curiosity, and they know something most people don't. Listening is not passive. It's not about waiting your turn to speak. It's an active performance of empathy. Imagine a conversation as a dance. One person leads with words. The other responds with presence, with subtle gestures, pauses, nods, and silence that says, "I'm here, keep going." That's what the best communicators do. They create space. They let others unfold. And that space, and that quiet, becomes sacred. Let's start with the first tool, presence. You can't fake it. People feel when you're distracted. They sense it in your eyes, in your breathing, in your responses that arrive a second too late. Presence is about anchoring yourself in the now. When someone speaks, your only mission is to listen, not to agree, not to advise, just to receive. That means silencing your internal commentator, that voice that says, "I've heard this before," or "Wait till I tell them my story." Presence is when your mind and body are both still, when you're not thinking of where you need to be next or what you'll say after. It's when you let the other person's world become your own, if only for a few minutes. The second tool, observation. Active listening goes beyond words. It's about tuning in to everything else, the tone, the pauses, the hesitations, the unspoken. Because human communication isn't made of sentences, it's made of signals. What someone doesn't say often reveals more than what they do. Think about it. The way someone glances down mid-sentence, the subtle change in their breathing, the slight tension in their jaw. Each of those is a message, a whisper beneath the words. When you start noticing those cues, you'll see stories unfolding inside every conversation. Stories people don't even know they're telling. The third tool, the pause. Most people fear silence. They rush to fill it, to patch it, to make the conversation flow. But silence isn't the enemy. It's the secret. A few seconds of silence after someone speaks can do more than any clever response. It tells them, "I'm thinking about what you just said. I value it enough to give it space." That pause invites honesty. It allows emotion to surface. It gives both of you a moment to breathe. And in that breath, the truth often emerges. Great communicators use silence like a sculptor uses clay, shaping the rhythm of the conversation, giving depth and meaning to every word that follows. The fourth tool, reflection. Reflection is how you prove that you've truly heard. It's not parroting back their words. It's paraphrasing their feeling. Instead of, "So you're saying you're tired of work," you might say, "It sounds like work has been draining your energy lately." That single sentence shows empathy, accuracy, and attention. It tells the speaker, "You got me." And when people feel understood, they open up more. That's how dialogue becomes depth. The fifth tool, curiosity. Curiosity transforms a conversation from routine to revelation. It's the difference between asking, "How are you?" and asking, "What's been on your mind lately?" A curious question opens doors. It takes the conversation somewhere unexpected. It gives permission for truth. But curiosity isn't interrogation. It's gentle. It's patient. It's about exploring, not extracting. You're not digging for facts. You're searching for meaning. And finally, the most powerful tool of all, empathy. Empathy isn't agreement. It's understanding without judgment. It's listening, not to reply, but to feel with someone. When someone shares their pain, empathy doesn't rush to fix it. It just says, I'm here with you. When someone shares their dream, empathy doesn't minimize it. It says, I believe that matters to you. Empathy is what makes your presence healing. It turns you from just a listener into a mirror where others can finally see themselves clearly. So how do you bring all of this together? Start small. Practice presence in your next conversation. Notice one nonverbal cue. Allow one extra pause before speaking. Reflect back one emotion. Ask one deeper question. That's it. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be intentional. Over time, these tools become second nature. Your listening evolves from surface-level interaction to soulful connection. And people will feel it. They'll gravitate to you, and because being around you makes them feel seen, safe, and valued. Remember, words connect minds. Listening connects souls. And when you master that, when you begin to hear beneath the noise, your conversations stop being transactions. They become transformations. In the next chapter, we'll explore what happens when you bring these tools into the real world, into your workplace, your relationships, your daily life. You'll see how active listening doesn't just make you a better communicator, it makes you a more compassionate human being. We'll step into the ripple effect, how one listener can transform an entire world. Chapter 4. The Ripple Effect. Transforming your world. When you change the way you listen, you change the way people experience you. And when people experience you differently, your world begins to shift in ways you never imagined. Active listening isn't just a skill, it's an energy, a presence that travels beyond words. It touches your relationships, your work, your leadership, your influence. Because when you start hearing people deeply, you unlock something primal in them, the need to be understood. And understanding is power. Let's start with the place where most of your life happens: work. Think about the meetings you've sat in, the conference calls, the endless back and forth messages. How often are people truly listening? Most are multitasking, typing while hearing, waiting for their turn to speak, building counter-arguments in silence. It's no wonder most workplaces feel chaotic and disconnected. Everyone's talking, no one's hearing. But introduce one active listener, just one, and the entire atmosphere changes. A leader who listens transforms confusion into clarity. They notice the tremor in an employee's voice, the hesitation before a suggestion, the idea someone almost didn't share. That moment, that tiny acknowledgement, can spark innovation, loyalty, and trust. Because people don't give their best to those who manage them. They give their best to those who see them. Active listening, in a professional sense, becomes your quiet superpower. It sharpens your intuition. It helps you sense what others can't say out loud. It earns you respect without force and influence without noise. The best negotiators don't dominate a conversation. They absorb it. They make silence do the heavy lifting. They let others fill the space, reveal their priorities, and in that quiet, find the truth. In business, that's not just empathy, that's strategy. Now let's move closer into your personal life. Think about how many arguments you've seen that began, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't heard. A partner says, "You don't understand me." A friend says, "You never listen." A parent says, "You're not hearing what I'm trying to say." These aren't just emotional statements, they're cries for connection. When you become an active listener, you turn those cries into calm, because your attention itself becomes love. Listening, real listening, is one of the most profound acts of care a human can give another. You stop trying to fix. You stop trying to win. You simply witness. And that witnessing gives others permission to unfold, to be vulnerable, to heal. There's a story of a man who spent his entire life in conflict with his teenage son. Every talk turned into a lecture. Every silence became resentment. One day, the father decided to change just one thing. He would stop responding immediately. He would listen, pause, and then ask, "Tell me more." At first, it felt awkward, forced, but over time, something shifted. The boy began to open up. The conversations stretched longer. They began to laugh again. The father said later, "I thought I needed the right words. Turns out, I just needed to stop talking." That's the ripple. One act of listening, creating waves of reconciliation. The ripple extends even further, to strangers, to communities, to the world. Imagine if society listened more before reacting, before commenting, before judging. Imagine social media built on listening rather than shouting. Imagine governments that paused before responding. Marriages that waited before defending. Parents that heard before correcting. Listening doesn't just repair relationships, it prevents destruction. Because silence before speech gives birth to understanding before action. But here's the beautiful paradox. When you practice active listening long enough, the world starts to listen back. Your environment shifts subtly. Conversations become more meaningful. People become calmer around you. They start mirroring your rhythm, slower, softer, more open. Your relationships become deeper. Your influence becomes quieter, but stronger. And people leave your presence feeling lighter. Not because you solved their problems, but because you made them feel seen. Think about it. We live in a world overflowing with information, yet starving for attention. Every day, people scroll, shout, and perform, just hoping someone will listen. When you're the person who truly does, you become rare, magnetic, memorable. That's why the ripple effect of active listening doesn't just improve your world, it elevates your identity. People begin to trust you with their truths. They see you as a grounding presence in a chaotic world. They open up in ways they don't with others, because deep listening creates a kind of emotional gravity. It pulls honesty toward it. And here's the secret behind that gravity. When you listen deeply, you don't just change others. You change yourself. You become more patient, more curious, more aware. You begin hearing the world differently. The quiet between words, the emotion beneath anger, the story beneath silence. You learn to read the air, to sense the things that language fails to carry. That's emotional intelligence in motion. That's what makes great leaders, empathetic partners, remarkable creators, and unforgettable communicators. So pause for a moment. Think about the last meaningful conversation you had. What made it powerful? It wasn't just the words, was it? It was the rhythm, the trust, the feeling that you were both there, in that moment, fully. That's what active listening creates, moments that matter. And as you create more of those moments, your life begins to feel richer. Not because it's louder, but because it's deeper. In the next chapter, we'll explore the traps, the subtle habits that pull you away from active listening. The ones that disguise themselves as good intentions, fixing, helping, advising, talking. You'll learn how to recognize those patterns. and how to break free. Because mastering active listening isn't just about learning what to do, it's about unlearning what gets in the way. Chapter 5: Common Traps and How to Avoid Them. Listening sounds simple, but true listening and deep, intentional listening is one of the hardest things in the world, because the biggest barriers to active listening aren't outside of us. They live inside our minds. They wear the disguise of good intentions, wanting to help, to fix, to advise, to relate. But beneath that disguise lies a single, subtle truth. We're often more focused on our response than on their reality. And that's where most conversations quietly collapse. Let's start with the first trap, the fix-it fallacy. It's human nature. You see someone struggling, and your instinct says, "I know how to solve that." But the moment you jump into fix, you take ownership of their experience. You move the spotlight from them to you. They're no longer being heard, they're being managed. It happens everywhere. A friend says they're overwhelmed, and you reply, "Have you tried time blocking?" A partner says they feel unappreciated, and you explain why you've been busy. A colleague shares frustration, and you instantly offer a productivity hack. You're helping, right? Not really. You're interrupting an emotional process that needed space, not solutions. Listening isn't about fixing. It's about holding space for someone to unfold, even if that space feels uncomfortable. Because most people don't want a repairman for their pain, they want a witness to it. Then there's the waiting to speak syndrome. You've been there. Someone's talking, but you're not fully hearing. You're rehearsing what you'll say next. You're polishing your story, your defense, your point. Your lips are closed, but your mind is loud. This trap is deadly because it mimics attentiveness. You nod, you make eye contact, you even say, "yeah," at the right times. But energetically, you're gone. And people can feel that absence. Active listening demands silence, not just from your mouth, but from your ego. It means being curious instead of certain, open instead of defensive. When you let go of the need to be interesting, you finally become interested. That's where connection lives. The third trap, the relatability reflex. It sounds like empathy, but it's actually ego in disguise. Someone tells you they lost their job. You respond, "I know exactly how that feels. That happened to me last year." You mean well. But what you just did, unconsciously, was redirect their story into yours. It's subtle, but it shifts the emotional center of gravity. Instead of expanding the space of listening, it collapses it. Their moment becomes your memory. There's a better way. When you feel the urge to relate, pause. Acknowledge it silently. Then say, "That sounds really hard. Tell me more." That small change transforms relatability into empathy, because empathy doesn't need to insert itself, it just witnesses. The fourth trap is listening with an agenda. This is where you're technically hearing, but only as long as it serves your point, your argument, or your desired outcome. Parents do this, leaders do this, partners do this. You listen to find the flaw, to correct the logic, to control the direction. But listening with an agenda isn't listening. It's manipulation dressed as attentiveness, and people sense it immediately. True listening demands you release the need to win, to be right, to prove. You listen not to answer, but to understand. Even if understanding means realizing you were wrong. That's emotional courage. Then there's the interruptive instinct. We do it without realizing, finishing people's sentences, cutting in mid-thought, jumping ahead because we already know. But every interruption sends the same hidden message. What I have to say matters more than what you're saying. Over time, interruptions drain trust, like a slow leak in a tire. People stop opening up. They shorten their responses. They protect their truth. To fix this, practice restraint. Let pauses breathe. Let silence finish their sentence before you do. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. And finally, the self-image trap. This one is quiet, but powerful. It's when you're listening not to connect, but to perform connection. You're thinking, I need to look compassionate, or I want them to think I'm insightful, so you mirror their emotion just enough. You tilt your head, soften your tone, say the right things. But authenticity can't be faked. True listening doesn't need theater. It needs truth. Drop the performance. Drop the good listener act. Just be there. Listening isn't about how you appear. It's about how they feel when they're with you. Now that we've explored these traps, here's the hard truth. You won't avoid them perfectly. You'll still interrupt sometimes. You'll still drift, still relate, still fix. But the goal isn't perfection. It's awareness. Every time you catch yourself mid-trap, you reclaim presence. You return to the moment. And that return, again and again, builds mastery. Because the act of noticing is the act of growing. So here's what to practice this week. Catch the urge to fix. Instead, just say, that sounds really tough. What do you think you'll do next? Catch the urge to relate. Instead, breathe. Then ask, how did that make you feel? Catch the urge to interrupt. Instead, let a full second of silence pass before responding. Catch the urge to prove. Instead, whisper to yourself, stay curious. Do that consistently, and you'll begin to feel a shift. Conversations will stretch. People will lean in. Moments will feel lighter. That's the power of awareness over perfection, because being a great listener isn't about having flawless technique. It's about having the humility to keep coming back, again and again, to presence. To remind yourself that every conversation is a chance to honor someone else's world. That's how you create a reputation of quiet power. That's how people begin to trust you, even when you say nothing. In the next chapter, we'll take all this awareness and turn it into transformation. You'll discover the Active Listening Challenge, a daily practice designed to sharpen your focus, deepen your empathy, and help you rewire the way you connect. Because transformation doesn't happen in theory, it happens in repetition. And the more you listen with intention, the more you'll start hearing the world whisper back, I see you too. Chapter 6. Your Active Listening Challenge. Transformation doesn't happen through inspiration. It happens through repetition, through practice, through choosing again and again to show up differently, especially when it would be easier to stay the same. So far, we've unpacked the art of listening, its depth, its silence, its traps. But now, it's time to move from knowing to becoming. This chapter is your bridge, a 7-day challenge designed to rewire your attention, retrain your responses, and restore the quiet powers of being truly present. Because awareness without action fades, but awareness turned into ritual becomes transformation. Day 1. The awareness reset. Before you can listen to others, you must first notice how rarely you actually do. Today's task is simple. Pay attention to the moments you drift. As you talk with people, observe your own mind. Do you start planning your reply before they finish? Do you zone out midway through their story? Do you interrupt, not with your voice, but with your thoughts? Don't judge it. Just notice it. Awareness is the first act of humility. The moment you realize how loud your own mind has become. Each time you catch yourself drifting, take one deep breath and silently repeat, return. Return to the sound of their voice. Return to their eyes, their tone, their presence. By the end of the day, you'll be shocked by how often your ego tries to steal the mic. That's not failure. That's awakening. Day 2. The Silence Discipline. Today, your mission is to speak less than you normally would. In every conversation, consciously create small spaces of silence. Don't rush to fill them. Don't rescue the moment. Silence is not absence. It's presence amplified. When you pause, you allow emotions to breathe, thoughts to settle, and truths to rise that might have otherwise drowned in noise. Notice how people respond when you let the silence linger. Some will open up more. Some will grow uncomfortable. Both reactions are windows into their relationship with presence and with you. Your goal is not to manipulate silence, but to honor it. Because silence is where the deepest listening happens. Day 3. The Mirror Exercise. Today, practice reflective listening. Every time someone shares something meaningful, instead of reacting, reflect back what you heard. For example, they say, "I'm just tired of being overlooked." You say, "It sounds like you've been feeling invisible lately." They say, "I don't even know why I'm angry." You say, "You're not sure what triggered it, but it's still heavy." That's it. No advice, no story, just reflection. Reflection does two things. It shows that you heard, and it helps them hear themselves, because sometimes people can't process their emotions until they echo back to them. By practicing this, you train yourself to respond from empathy, not ego. You stop trying to be right and start being real. Day 4. The Discomfort Test. Today's challenge is emotional. Listen to someone you normally avoid. Maybe it's a coworker who frustrates you, a family member who drains you, a friend who never seems to understand you. Your goal: listen without judgment, without defense, without the need to fix. You don't have to agree. You don't even have to like them. Just hold space. Discomfort is a spiritual gym. It strengthens your patience, your empathy, your ability to remain still in the storm of emotion. Because listening to those who comfort you is easy. Listening to those who challenge you, that's mastery. Afterward, write one sentence. What did this conversation reveal about me? Growth begins at that answer. Day 5. The Question Ritual. Today, shift your focus from statements to questions. Every time you feel the urge to give advice or to speak about yourself, replace it with a genuine question. Ask things like, what was that like for you? What do you think you needed most in that moment? If nothing could go wrong, what would you do? Questions are portals. They open the inner world of another person and show you the architecture of their mind. But not all questions are equal. Avoid leading or judgmental questions, like, "Don't you think that was a mistake? Why didn't you just—" Ask to understand, not to correct. Ask to expand, not to narrow. By the end of the day, you'll realize curiosity is more powerful than advice. Day 6. The Presence Audit. Today's task is to audit your energy, not your words. How do people feel when they talk to you? Do they feel rushed? Do they feel safe? Do they feel heard? Presence is emotional currency. People can feel it even in silence. Throughout the day, slow your movements. Lower your tone. Match your breathing to theirs during conversations. This is energetic mirroring, a subtle act that says, "I'm with you." When you embody calm, people unconsciously soften. Their defenses lower. Their honesty rises. You become a sanctuary in a world addicted to noise. Day 7. The gratitude closure. The final day is about reflection and appreciation. Choose 3 people you've spoken to this week. Reach out and thank them, not for what they said, but for what they shared. You might say, "Thank you for trusting me with that conversation. I really appreciated hearing your perspective. I learned something from what you said the other day." Gratitude seals the transformation. It shifts listening from a skill to a way of being. Because when you express gratitude, you affirm that their words mattered. And that's the quiet miracle of true listening. You make people feel seen. Now here's the deeper truth about this challenge. It's not about becoming a perfect listener. It's about becoming a more present human. A person whose calmness disarms, whose curiosity heals, whose silence comforts. You can't control whether people will listen to you, but you can control how deeply you listen to them. And over time, that energy reshapes your world. People will seek your presence without knowing why. Conversations will feel sacred. Relationships will deepen, not because you speak better, but because you hear differently. That's what mastery looks like. Invisible, quiet, powerful. So as you move forward, remember this mantra. I don't need to speak to be understood. I need to listen to be remembered. Because listening, real listening, is not just an act of kindness. It's an act of leadership, an act of love, an act of consciousness itself. In the next and final chapter, we'll bring everything home, exploring what happens when you turn your new listening energy inward. Because the deepest voice you'll ever have to hear isn't someone else's, it's your own. Chapter 7. Listening to yourself. The forgotten conversation. There's a voice that never leaves you. It speaks in the pauses, in the hesitation before a yes, in the ache behind your smile. You've heard it, but maybe you've spent years ignoring it. The voice of your own truth. We've spent so much time learning to listen outward, to friends, partners, co-workers, the world. But the hardest person to truly listen to is the one inside, because that voice doesn't shout, it whispers. And the modern world has made it almost impossible to hear whispers anymore. Most people don't suffer from a lack of advice. They suffer from a lack of silence. Think about it. From the moment you wake up, the noise begins. Notifications, messages, opinions, algorithms, everyone talking at you, everyone telling you what to do, what to buy, what to feel, who to be. And in that endless stream of sound, your inner voice becomes background noise. But that voice, the one you silence every day, it's the only one that actually knows who you are. It's the one that tells you when something isn't right, the one that senses danger long before logic does, the one that knows when it's time to let go or to hold on. To master active listening in the world, you must first become fluent in listening to yourself. Start here, the pause practice. Every day, find a moment, just 5 minutes, to sit with no music, no phone, no agenda. Close your eyes, breathe, and then listen. Not to the world, to the pulse inside you. Ask, what do I need right now? Not what others expect, not what you should do, but what your soul actually needs. You might hear exhaustion. You might hear grief. You might hear nothing at first, just the echo of your own restlessness. That's okay. It's been a long time since you've listened. The more you practice, the louder that inner signal becomes. Not in volume, but in clarity. Listening to yourself also means believing yourself. How many times have you felt uneasy around someone but stayed anyway? How many times have you said yes when everything in your body whispered no? How many times have you called it intuition, then talked yourself out of it because it didn't make logical sense? That's the tragedy of modern intelligence. We've learned to worship the mind and abandon the gut. But intuition isn't magic, it's memory. It's your subconscious storing a lifetime of patterns, emotions, and signals, then translating them into feeling. And when you ignore those feelings, you teach your intuition to go silent. Listening to yourself means honoring that feeling before the facts arrive. It's saying, I trust me even when I can't explain why. There's also another side, the inner critic, that constant whisper of doubt. You're not enough. You always mess this up. Who do you think you are? Ironically, the more we ignore our deeper voice, the louder the critic gets, because silence doesn't quiet the mind. It amplifies whatever we refuse to face. The key is not to silence your inner critic, it's to listen to it differently. When that voice says, "You're not ready," respond gently, "Thank you for trying to protect me," because that's all it's doing. Protecting you from risk, from shame, from pain. Your inner critic is not the enemy. It's a wounded part of you, begging to be heard. Once you listen without judgment, it softens. Once you show it compassion, it transforms. The same way you learned to hold space for others, you must now hold space for yourself. Here's the secret. Self-listening isn't self-obsession. It's self-alignment. When you truly listen to yourself, you stop chasing noise. You stop seeking validation. You stop over-explaining your boundaries because they start to feel natural. You begin to move differently. You start saying no without guilt. You start saying yes without fear. You stop overthinking your path because you can feel when it's right. And people notice, not because you're louder, but because your energy becomes steady, grounded, magnetic. There's a peace that comes when your inner voice and your outer life finally match. That's when you become someone rare, someone who doesn't just listen to the world, but listens through it. You begin to hear things others miss. The tremble in someone's tone that says they're scared. The silence in a text that says they're hurting. The emotion behind a smile that says, "I'm fine," when they're not. That's what deep listening does. It upgrades your sensitivity, not your fragility, your awareness. And awareness is the first step to compassion. So here's your reflection for this chapter. Tonight, before you sleep, take one slow breath. Then ask yourself, what part of me have I been ignoring? Maybe it's your body begging for rest. Maybe it's your creativity starving for expression. Maybe it's your inner child tired of being so strong. Listen. Don't fix. Don't rush. Just listen. Because the moment you do, you'll realize something powerful. The voice you've been waiting your whole life to hear has been yours all along. In the next chapter, we'll go beyond the personal. We'll explore how active listening can change the dynamics of every relationship you touch, from your family to your workplace, from love to leadership. Because when you can listen to yourself clearly, you finally become capable of hearing the world completely. Chapter 9. The Common Traps. How we lose connection without realizing it. We all like to believe we're good listeners. We nod at the right moments. We say, "Uh-huh." We smile. We make eye contact. But the truth is, most of the time, we're not really listening. We're waiting. waiting for our turn to speak, waiting for the silence that gives us permission to unload what we want to say. It's not because we're selfish, it's because we've been trained, by the pace of modern life, to value speed over presence, reply over reflection, noise over nuance, and that's how we fall into the traps. Trap 1. The fixer's reflex. You hear a problem, and instantly your mind starts searching for solutions. You don't mean to interrupt, but your thoughts sprint ahead of the speaker's heart. Your friend says, "I've been feeling stuck lately, and you respond, "Have you tried journaling? Or maybe you should start working out again." But here's the truth. Most people don't want fixing. They want feeling. They're not looking for answers. They're looking for resonance. For someone to sit in the dark with them, not drag them into the light too quickly. Because empathy, without patience, becomes intrusion. When someone shares their pain, they're not asking you to solve it. They're asking, "Can I trust you to hold this with me?" Trap 2. The waiting to speak syndrome. You know the moment. You're nodding, you're smiling, but inside your brain, you're crafting your response. You're rehearsing your next line. You're comparing their story to your own. You're not listening, you're loading. This is one of the most common and most destructive forms of disconnection. Because in that moment, you're no longer with the person. You're in your head, watching the conversation instead of being inside it. Listening is not waiting, it's witnessing. True listening means quieting the noise in your own mind long enough for someone else's truth to find room to exist. It means surrendering control, letting go of the need to sound wise, to be right, or to impress. The greatest listeners are not the most articulate people. They're the most present one. Trap 3. The distraction. Drift. We live in an attention economy. Your phone buzzes, a notification flashes. Your brain splits between pixels and people. You think you can multitask, but you can't. Science says even a glance away for a few seconds breaks emotional connection. You might return to the conversation, but something invisible has already fractured. Because connection requires undivided attention. When you divide your focus, you dilute your empathy. Presence is expensive in a world of distraction, but that's what makes it priceless. So next time you talk to someone, try this. Put the phone face down. Turn your body toward them. Let your eyes rest. Not dart. You'll feel it. They'll feel it. And the energy between you will shift. Trap 4. The echo chamber of assumptions. We all think we know what someone means because we've seen it before, heard it before, lived it before. But assumptions are mental shortcuts that kill understanding. You stop hearing them and start hearing your own story replayed in their words. Someone says, "I feel overwhelmed," and you translate that into your own version of stress. But maybe their overwhelmed means something different. Maybe it means invisible. Maybe it means trapped. Active listening means suspending interpretation until you've earned clarity. It means asking, when you say overwhelmed, what does that feel like for you? That one question can change everything. It slows the rush to judgment, and it opens a door for truth to walk through. Trap 5. The emotional hijack. Sometimes what someone says triggers something deep in you. Maybe a memory. Maybe a wound you thought had healed. Before you know it, you're reacting, not listening. You're defending, you're explaining, you're fighting ghosts from your past, instead of hearing the person in front of you. This is one of the hardest traps to escape, because it demands self-awareness and restraint. But awareness is the antidote. When you feel that rising heat, that urge to speak or justify, breathe. Notice it without acting on it. Listening doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. It means managing them so they don't drown out someone else's voice. Trap 6. The illusion of understanding. You think you've got it. You summarize, you nod, you assume. But the illusion of understanding is often more dangerous than misunderstanding. Because when you assume you get it, you stop asking questions. You stop exploring nuance. You close the door on discovery. True connection requires curiosity, even when you think you already know. Especially then, every person carries a world inside them. And worlds aren't understood by glances. They're explored through patience, humility, and genuine wonder. We lose connection not because we stop caring, but because we stop noticing. Listening, real listening, requires effort. It demands energy, emotional control, and intention. That's why so few people do it. But that's also why the ones who do, the ones who truly master this art, become unforgettable. People don't talk about their best conversations. They talk about the people who made them feel seen. Here's the hard truth. You can't listen deeply if your ego's in the room. Every time you need to be right, you sacrifice understanding. Every time you rush to reply, you trade curiosity for control. Every time you assume, you silence truth. But the moment you quiet your ego, the moment you decide to simply witness another person without needing to control their story, you create something sacred. That's what makes great listeners magnetic. They become safe spaces in a noisy world. So how do we fix this? It begins with awareness. Every conversation is a mirror. If you notice yourself interrupting, drifting, assuming, defending, don't judge it. Just bring yourself back. Presence is not perfection, it's return. Every time you return, you strengthen your ability to connect. You build the muscle of attention. You become, slowly and surely, someone people feel drawn to. Because you're no longer reacting to what's said, you're responding to what's meant. When you remove these traps, when you clear the internal noise, you start to hear things most people miss. The emotion under the words, the hesitation between sentences, the truth behind the tone. And that's when listening becomes something more than communication. It becomes intuition. In the next chapter, we'll explore exactly that, how mastering active listening sharpens your intuition, your influence, and your impact. Because when you learn to listen beyond words, you start hearing the world in ways most people never will. Chapter 10. The Art of Intuitive Listening. Hearing beyond words. There's a kind of listening that goes beyond hearing. It happens when the space between words becomes louder than the words themselves. When the pauses, the tone, the breath, and the silence tell a story, words can't. That's intuitive listening. The art of tuning into what people mean, not just what they say. You've met someone like this before. They don't interrupt, they don't rush you, they don't just hear you, they read you. You walk away thinking, they get me even when I didn't know how to explain myself. That's not a gift, it's a discipline, and it begins with presence. Presence is the frequency of intuition. Intuition doesn't live in noise. It's subtle. It whispers. It needs space to speak. When you're fully present with someone, you stop filtering them through your expectations. You stop thinking about how you appear, what to say next, or what they'll think. In that stillness, your awareness expands. You start to pick up on micro signals, the slight tightening of a jaw, the half-second pause before an answer, the way someone's eyes flicker when they're holding back emotion. It's not about reading minds. It's about reading energy. Every emotion carries a vibration. Joy, fear, resentment, hope. And when you're fully attuned, you can sense that vibration before a word is spoken. You begin to feel the truth behind the mask, the layers of listening. Most people only operate at the surface level. They hear the words, respond, and move on. But intuitive listeners move through layers, hearing, the basic intake of sound, understanding, the mental interpretation of meaning, feeling, the emotional recognition beneath the words, sensing, the energetic intuition of what's unspoken. It's that fourth layer that transforms communication. It's where leadership, empathy, and influence are born. When you reach that level, you stop reacting to behavior. You start responding to being. You stop saying, "Why did they say that?" and start asking, "What pain or need might be behind that?" You don't just hear anger, you sense exhaustion. You don't just hear confidence, you sense fear beneath it. You don't just hear words, you feel intentions. That is the quiet power of intuitive listening. Why most people never reach this level? Because it requires stillness, and stillness feels uncomfortable in a world addicted to motion. We fill silence with words because we fear what silence might reveal. We talk over moments that could have taught us something profound. But silence is not emptiness. It's information. It's the space where truth gathers the courage to emerge. Intuitive listeners use silence like a scalpel, carefully, respectfully, purposefully. They know that after someone speaks, waiting a few seconds before responding often invites what's really on their heart to come out. That pause says, "You're safe, take your time." And in that safety, honesty blooms. Listening as leadership. You can't lead people you don't understand, and you can't understand people you don't listen to. Great leaders aren't the loudest in the room. They're the most attuned. They hear tension before it becomes conflict. They sense burnout before it becomes resignation. They pick up hesitation before it turns into resistance. Because they listen beyond performance. They listen for patterns. Every complaint, every silence, every sigh is data. And intuitive leaders don't dismiss it. They decode it. They know that influence begins with awareness, and awareness begins with attention. If you want to influence others, start by making them feel understood. That's what softens defenses, builds trust, and moves hearts. People don't follow titles. They follow those who hear them. The listening muscle. Like any muscle, intuition grows through repetition. Every day offers micro opportunities to train it. When someone speaks, resist the urge to fill the silence. When you sense tension, don't flee from it. Observe it. When you feel emotional noise rising in you, breathe through it. Every act of presence sharpens perception. Every moment of stillness deepens clarity. Every disciplined silence strengthens intuition. The more you practice this, the more fluent you become in the hidden language of human behavior. You'll start noticing that truth has texture. You'll feel it vibrate in the pauses and glances. And suddenly, the world around you starts revealing itself. Not because people change, but because you've learned how to truly listen. The subtle gift. There's a peace that comes from intuitive listening. Because when you hear beyond words, you stop needing constant validation or explanation. You stop fighting to be understood. You start focusing on understanding. And in doing so, your presence becomes magnetic. People feel lighter around you. They open up. They trust you, not because of what you say, but because of what you see. Intuitive listening is emotional intelligence in motion. It's empathy with awareness. It's presence that heals. So the next time you're in conversation, try this. Don't just hear the story. Hear the silence between sentences. Don't just see the smile. Notice the eyes behind it. Don't just respond. Receive. Because sometimes the loudest cry for help is hidden inside the calmest tone of voice. And sometimes the person who seems the strongest is quietly begging to be seen. The moment you learn to hear beyond words, you unlock a new kind of intelligence, one that can change how you connect, lead, love, and live. That's the quiet revolution of awareness. It's where communication becomes communion, and where understanding turns into healing.